The first thing Americans notice when they arrive in Australia is how instantly different the atmosphere feels. Australia looks familiar at first. Modern cities, friendly people, the same English language. But within minutes, you realize this country operates with a completely different energy. And that difference hits you long before you even leave the airport. Today, we're breaking down exactly what Americans notice first the moment they step into Australia. There's something in the air that's hard to describe but impossible to miss. A lightness, an ease, a fundamentally different approach to daily life that makes itself known immediately. Americans expect Australia to feel like a distant cousin of home, similar enough to be comfortable but exotic enough to be interesting. What they discover instead is a country that shares the language and many cultural touchstones, but has developed a completely different philosophy about how life should be lived. The difference isn't in the big, obvious things, it's in the rhythm, the tone, the underlying attitude that shapes every interaction. From the moment customs officers greet you with genuine warmth instead of professional distance, from the first conversation with a taxi driver who treats you like an old friend, Americans realize they've entered a culture that values something their own country often sacrifices: the art of not taking life too seriously while still taking care of each other. And that realization begins within minutes of arrival, sometimes before luggage even appears on the carousel. One of the biggest shocks is how relaxed everything feels. Australians move at a comfortable pace, never in a hurry, never rushing through life. For Americans used to constant speed and pressure, this calmness is almost confusing at first. The friendliness, the casual conversations, the humor, it all feels surprisingly warm. Americans are accustomed to efficiency being the highest priority. Fast service, quick transactions, minimal small talk unless you're already friends. But in Australia, even routine interactions unfold differently. Baristas chat while making coffee instead of rushing through orders. Shop assistants ask genuine questions about your day and seem to actually care about the answers. People make eye contact, smile readily, and treat strangers with a casualness that feels almost intimate to Americans used to more formal public interactions. This relaxed pace initially frustrates some Americans who are conditioned to value speed and productivity above all else. They find themselves waiting longer for service, standing in slower-moving lines, and experiencing what feels like unnecessary delays. But over time, most Americans realize this slower pace isn't inefficiency. It's a deliberate choice to prioritize human connection over pure productivity. Australians have decided that a few extra minutes spent making someone feel welcomed and valued is worth more than shaving seconds off a transaction. And once Americans adjust to this rhythm, many find it profoundly refreshing, a relief from the constant pressure to optimize every moment that defines so much of American life. Then comes the environment. Australia is bright, very bright. The sunlight, the colors, the outdoor lifestyle, the beaches only minutes away from major cities. Americans immediately notice how much time Australians spend outside, whether it's walking, swimming, or simply enjoying the weather. It feels like the whole country lives outdoors. The quality of light in Australia is different from what most Americans experience. Sharper, clearer, more intense. Colors seem more saturated, shadows more defined, and the sky a deeper blue than anywhere in the United States, except perhaps parts of California or Hawaii. This brightness affects everything. Architecture designed to manage intense sun, lifestyle patterns built around avoiding midday heat, and a national relationship with the outdoors that feels almost sacred. Americans notice that even major cities like Sydney and Melbourne maintain easy access to beaches, parks, and natural spaces. Office workers spend lunch breaks at the beach, families gather in parks for evening barbecues, and outdoor cafes remain packed year-round. The outdoor lifestyle isn't just recreational, it's fundamental to Australian identity and daily routine. Americans also notice the unique wildlife almost immediately. Birds with calls they've never heard before, possums wandering through urban areas at night, and the constant awareness that nature in Australia operates by different, sometimes dangerous rules. But rather than making Australians fearful, this seems to make them more respectful and connected to their environment. The relationship between Australians and their natural world feels more integrated, more conscious, and more celebrated than what most Americans experience back home. Another thing Americans notice quickly is how safe the country feels. Whether you're walking at night or wandering through busy streets, there's a level of comfort that stands out immediately. And before we go deeper, if you're enjoying videos like this, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode in this series. The sense of safety in Australia goes beyond just low crime statistics. It's a feeling embedded in how people interact and how public spaces are designed and used. Americans notice that women walk alone at night without constant vigilance, that children have more independence at younger ages, and that public transportation feels genuinely safe at all hours. There's less visible security presence because there's less apparent need for it. Australians seem to trust their fellow citizens in ways that many Americans have lost or never experienced. This safety extends to social interactions as well. Strangers help each other readily, people leave belongings unattended more casually, and there's a general assumption of good faith rather than suspicion. Americans often don't realize how much background anxiety they carry about safety until they experience Australia's more relaxed atmosphere. The constant threat assessment that many Americans perform unconsciously, checking exits, monitoring surroundings, keeping bags close, gradually diminishes in Australia. This doesn't mean Australia has no crime or danger, but the baseline level of social trust and community responsibility creates an environment where vigilance can relax and people can move through public space with less fear and more openness to spontaneous positive interactions with strangers. The humor is another surprise. Australians joke differently, more direct, more sarcastic, and sometimes brutally honest. But once Americans get used to it, it becomes one of the most enjoyable parts of living here. It breaks the ice instantly, and it's part of why people feel welcome so fast. Australian humor operates on the principle of taking the piss, teasing as a form of affection and leveling mechanism that prevents anyone from taking themselves too seriously. Americans initially struggle with this because it violates their cultural norms around politeness and positive reinforcement. In America, compliments are common and criticism is softened. In Australia, compliments are rare and teasing is constant. Australians mock their friends, their leaders, themselves, and visitors with equal enthusiasm, and Americans sometimes misinterpret this as hostility or disrespect. But once they understand the cultural code, they realize that being teased means you're accepted. Australians reserve their most brutal humor for people they like and trust. The humor also serves a cultural function of maintaining egalitarianism. Nobody gets to be too important, too impressive, or too self-serious without being brought back down through mockery. This creates a social environment where humility is enforced through comedy rather than criticism, where laughter deflates tension before it can escalate, and where social bonds are strengthened through shared jokes rather than shared achievements. Americans who successfully adapt to Australian humor often find it liberating. The freedom to be irreverent, to laugh at mistakes, and to not take every interaction seriously creates a lighter, less stressful social atmosphere than what many experienced back home. And of course, Americans quickly notice how multicultural Australia is. You hear different accents, languages, and see cultures blending everywhere. Food from every part of the world, people from every background. It's a mix that feels comfortable, open, and incredibly inviting. Australia's multiculturalism manifests differently than America's melting pot approach. Rather than expecting assimilation into a dominant culture, Australia tends toward a mosaic model where different cultures maintain distinct identities while coexisting peacefully. Americans notice this immediately in urban areas where entire neighborhoods reflect specific cultural communities: Vietnamese in Cabramatta, Greek in Melbourne, Chinese in various cities, but without the economic segregation or tension that often accompanies ethnic enclaves in American cities. The food scene particularly impresses Americans, who discover that even small Australian cities offer authentic cuisine from dozens of countries, often prepared by immigrants from those places rather than Americanized versions. Coffee culture influenced by Italian immigration, Asian food courts in every shopping center, and weekend markets featuring foods from around the world all demonstrate how thoroughly multicultural identity has been integrated into everyday Australian life. Americans also notice that conversations about race and immigration happen differently in Australia, less polarized in some ways, more openly discriminatory in others, shaped by different historical contexts and current political debates. The multiculturalism feels both more celebrated and more complicated than Americans expect. Neither a perfect harmony nor a source of constant conflict, but an ongoing negotiation that most Australians seem committed to navigating together. But the biggest thing Americans notice is how quickly Australia feels like home. It's not dramatic or overwhelming, it's subtle. The lifestyle, the warmth, the openness, the balance, it all adds up. Before they know it, many Americans realize they're experiencing a version of life they didn't expect. One that feels calmer, safer, and more human. And that's the first thing they truly notice about Australia. The sense of home doesn't come from familiarity. Australia is undeniably foreign in many ways. but from alignment with values many Americans hold but struggle to live by in their home country. The work-life balance Australians maintain, the priority they place on leisure and relationships over career advancement, the way they structure cities to maximize access to nature and beauty, the emphasis on equality and fairness even when imperfectly achieved, all of these create an environment where many Americans feel they can finally live according to principles they've always believed in but couldn't fully practice. Australia offers a version of Western democratic capitalism that's less intense, less competitive, less anxious than what most Americans experience. It's not perfect, and it has its own problems and contradictions, but for many Americans, those problems feel more manageable and the overall quality of life more sustainable. The realization that life can be lived differently, that you can work hard without sacrificing everything else, that you can be successful without constant stress, that you can build community without losing individuality, hits Americans gradually but powerfully during their first days and weeks in Australia. If you enjoyed today's video, hit the like button and subscribe for more global lifestyle and culture insights. And comment below, what surprised you the most about Australia?